In 2008, the world changed forever.
The worst day on Wall Street. We're now down 43%.
How low will it go, the stock market?
The credit crunch has brought Formula One crashing back down to earth.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
The financial crisis sent shockwaves through every industry. And not even Formula One was spared, especially Honda, which suddenly saw its $300 million F1 program as a liability rather than an asset. Overnight, hundreds of employees faced unemployment, and one of F1's proudest teams was about to disappear. Then came Ross Brawn's impossible gamble, buying the team when no one else would touch it. What happened next defied all logic. A team that shouldn't have existed won both championships in their debut season. This is the story of how desperation, genius, and a little rule-bending created the greatest underdog story in motorsport history. In late 2008, Honda shocked the Formula One world by announcing their immediate withdrawal from the sport. Their team, based in Brackley and backed by hundreds of millions in investment, suddenly had no future. Shutting it down would cost over $100 million in severance and contract cancellations. But if anyone was willing to take it on, Honda could walk away with less damage. As Honda's former technical director, Ross Brawn knew the inner workings of the team better than anyone. He saw more than a financial liability, he saw untapped potential. Behind the scenes, he rallied a small group of investors and began negotiations. But how much do you think he bought it for? If you have heard of Brawn GP before, then you know. But if you don't, put your guess down in the comments. The final offer? Just one single great British pound.
When we finally closed the deal, I gave £1 to the Honda executive to formalize the deal.
Yes, one for a $300 million team.
In a way, you persuaded Honda to change their minds and take this on board.
They would have spent $100 million to shut the company. We said, don't waste that money because then there's nothing left.
But it came with heavy baggage, debts, payroll, and no engine. Brawn had a team, but only weeks to make it race ready. The situation was precarious. Honda had been the team's engine supplier, and without them, the cars had no power. Most manufacturers had already committed to other teams, and the first race was just weeks away. Brawn turned to Mercedes, who agreed to supply engines, but with minimal support. The deal came with no guarantees, just a chance. Meanwhile, over 700 employees were still on payroll, and the team was burning through cash. To keep costs down, Brawn made painful cuts, letting go of nearly half the workforce. It was a gamble on every level: financial, logistical, and emotional. The £1 price tag wasn't the bargain it seemed. Honda avoided a costly shutdown, but Brawn assumed enormous risk. If the team failed, he and his investors would face financial ruin. Every decision had to be perfect, starting with the car. Honda had already developed the 2009 Challenger, the RA109, before pulling out. Brawn's engineers had worked tirelessly on it, and initial data looked promising.
And we couldn't understand where we'd gone wrong because our simulation showed we would be a second and a half quick.
Well, you've clearly got your numbers wrong then, haven't you?
Right.
Duh. You know, as if we're going to be 2 seconds faster than everybody.
But with limited testing time and a skeleton crew, no one knew if it was truly competitive. Just 4 weeks before the season's first race in Australia, the team officially rebranded as Brawn GP. The cars were painted white and green with minimal sponsorship, a far cry from Honda's corporate backing. The RA109, now the BG-P001, had been designed around a radical interpretation of the new 2009 regulations. While other teams focused on adapting to the stricter aerodynamic rules, Brawn's engineers had found a loophole, one that gave them an advantage no one expected. But loopholes are only useful if the car can run, and as the team packed up for Melbourne, the question wasn't just whether they could compete, it was whether their gamble would pay off before the money ran out. The 2009 Formula One season introduced new rules designed to make racing more competitive. The regulations reduced aerodynamic downforce by shrinking wings and simplifying bodywork. This was supposed to make overtaking easier, but Honda's engineers saw something others missed. They found a grey area in the rules that could give them back much of the lost downforce. This discovery would become the Double Diffuser, the secret behind Brawn GP's success. The Double Diffuser worked by adding a second layer to the rear underbody. While standard diffusers channeled air from under the car to create downforce, the Double Diffuser had extra openings that fed more air into a secondary channel. This design generated significantly more downforce than single diffusers, giving the car better grip in corners and a faster lap time. Other teams had dismissed the concept, assuming it violated the spirit of the rules and didn't add enough performance to be worth it. But when Brawn GP's car debuted in pre-season testing, its advantage was undeniable, and rivals protested, claiming it was illegal. The controversy reached its peak when Williams and Toyota revealed they had also developed double diffusers, though not as effectively integrated as Brawn's, and the FIA faced intense pressure to ban the design. Teams argued that if the loophole remained open, it would force everyone to redesign their cars mid-season. The decision came just 3 days before the season opener in Australia. The FIA ruled the double diffuser legal, confirming Brawn GP's advantage was here to stay. In Australia, the impact was immediate. Jenson Button took pole position by nearly a second, a massive margin in Formula One. The race was even more dominant. Button led from start to finish, followed by teammate Rubens Barrichello, securing a 1-2 finish in Brawn GP's debut. It was the first time a new team had achieved this since Mercedes' historic win in 1954. The paddock was stunned. Overnight, a team that did not exist 4 weeks earlier became the championship favourite. But the double diffuser wasn't just a clever trick. It was a carefully engineered solution to the new regulations. While rivals scrambled to copy it, Brawn GP had a head start. Their design was refined, tested, and optimized during Honda's development. Other teams needed months to catch up, and even then, their versions were often less efficient. This gave Brawn a crucial early season edge. The real test came as the season progressed, as the initial dominance couldn't last forever. Red Bull, using their own interpretation of the double diffuser, closed the gap, and by mid-season, their improved aerodynamics made them serious contenders. By the second half of the year, the performance gap had narrowed. Button, who had won 6 of the first 7 races, struggled to maintain his form. The car's early superiority faded, and podium finishes became harder to secure. But the double diffuser had already done its job. It built an insurmountable lead. Without that initial advantage, Brawn GP might not have survived the season. While the focus was on track success, financial pressures were growing behind the scenes. Winning races brought attention, but sponsorship deals took time, and the team's survival was never guaranteed. The double diffuser had given them glory, but it couldn't solve their long-term problems. It started to look like the fairy tale was also a race against time. Brawn GP dominated early in 2009, but behind the scenes, the team was running on fumes. Despite wins and new sponsors, their tiny budget couldn't match rivals spending over $100 million a season. Over 350 staff were laid off, and development stalled. Meanwhile, Red Bull surged forward with constant upgrades. Brawn's early lead faded, and Jenson Button, after winning 6 of the first 7 races, only reached the podium once in the next 11. As Red Bull closed in, Brawn's lack of funds showed. By Brazil, the penultimate race, Button's lead had shrunk to 14 points. Vettel needed a strong finish to keep his title hopes alive. Rubens Barrichello, Button's teammate, took pole, while Button qualified a disappointing 14th after a strategic error in qualifying. But under the São Paulo sun, the 2009 Brazilian Grand Prix delivered chaos, tension and redemption. From 14th on the grid, Jenson Button drove the race of his life, elbows out, overtaking 5 cars in the first lap alone. While front runners clashed and strategies unravelled, Button remained composed, carving his way through the pack with calculated aggression. Rubens Barrichello, starting from pole, suffered a puncture and dropped out of contention. Meanwhile, Mark Webber cruised to victory for Red Bull, but all eyes were on Button. Finishing 5th was enough, just barely, to crown him world champion and to complete one of the most improbable stories in F1 history. In just over 10 months, Brawn GP had risen from the ashes of Honda's withdrawal to claim both the drivers' and constructors' championships. It was a fairy tale ending for a team running on fumes, and a final, glorious defiance of Formula One's brutal economics.